Strange, isn't it, to love a book when the words on the pages become so precious that they feel like part of your own history because they are. This quote comes from one of my favorite books, The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. The Starless Sea falls into this category of media that has fascinated me since before I can remember. It's a story about stories. Erin Morgenstern is able to perfectly explain the ways in which stories define humanity. From cave paintings to folk tales to trashy celebrity tabloids, falling for a captivating story is a universal experience. If you've ever found yourself getting lost within the words on a page or swept away into the magic of a film projected on the big screen, you can relate. When we have a favorite book or movie, it can feel like that piece of art is literally a part of you. Like, if you look yourself up in a dictionary, that's what you'll find written beneath your name. Film and literature have been recognized as respectable art forms for much longer than video games, but games as art has quickly become a more mainstream idea in the last decade. In my opinion, games have a unique strength that opens up the possibilities of storytelling in ways that cannot be achieved by books or movies. There are so many video games that have inspired and influenced people through their stories, and the immersive and interactive qualities of video games allow them to tell stories that are only effective in the context of a game. Going back to this quote, if a story within a book can touch you in a way that makes it feel like a part of your history, in a way, video games literally are a part of your history. I went on that journey. I faced those obstacles. I made it up the mountain. The story couldn't have happened without me. My name is Gigi, and this is the first episode of Stories and Sidequests, a series of video essays discussing and analyzing the stories in some of my favorite games. I wanted to kick this series off with a video that would give my audience a sense of who I am, an introduction to my personal tastes and style of content. What better way to introduce myself to you than to talk about some of the games that define me? These 10 games I've chosen aren't just my favorite games. They've influenced me creatively, emotionally, and it might sound dramatic, but I feel they can represent who I am as a person. A couple of disclaimers before we begin. The following list is in no particular order. It's hard enough to pare down the games I love to include just 10 entries. I've also decided to limit my options for this list to include only one game per franchise. With that out of the way, let's get started. Omori isn't the first indie pixel RPG horror game to cover themes of loneliness, grief, guilt, or even repressed memories, but it succeeds where similar games fail by making me care about the cast. Sunny, Kel, Hiro, Aubrey, Basil, and Mari are all characters that have made themselves at home in my heart, and the friendship they shared was what kept me pushing through the game's scary or difficult moments. When I first played this game, I immediately felt nostalgic for the time I spent playing make-believe with my friends as a kid. I felt immense joy watching Omori and his friends play in the colorful world of Headspace. For a psychological horror game, Omori manages to make each cast member feel real and important and worth protecting. Don't be fooled, this game does not hold back on some of its darker themes. While it's an experience I highly recommend to those who are interested, please take care to check the trigger warnings and try to be in a good mental space before jumping right in. Despite this, there's a beauty within the pain that really spoke to me on a personal level. Omori teaches us that our trauma is worth acknowledging, and though it can be scary, crossing that threshold will be the first step to healing. Omori will break your heart, but there is an undeniable feeling of hope and recovery that drives the narrative. Throughout your playthrough, you'll learn to calm yourself in moments of panic, focus your thoughts, persist through hardships, and overcome your fears. As a sequel to the quirky puzzle shooter about a woman trapped in a testing facility controlled by a maniacal robot, Portal 2 expands on and enhances everything the original had to offer. If Portal was a clever puzzle game with a dark sense of humor, Portal 2 is a masterclass in storytelling, world building, and character development. The game forces you to delve deep into the history of aperture science, and the story you uncover within those depths is a gripping one. It holds huge implications for the world and characters of Portal. When it first released in 2011, Portal 2 managed to offer one of the most cinematic experiences in gaming, and it still holds up today with its incredible atmosphere, music, and voice acting. Aperture's story is one of hubris, of people reaching too far and creating their own undoing, but it's also a deeply human story, told through some of the funniest and most memorable writing I've ever seen in a game. Even in its darkest moments, the game finds ways to make you laugh. Portal 2 is hilarious and exciting, and was one of the first games to really expose me to the potential games had to deliver memorable stories. Disco Elysium is one of the weirdest, most thought-provoking games I've ever played. At its core, it's a role-playing game in the vein of Dungeons & Dragons where you build stats and roll die to make decisions and move the story forward. But instead of playing as a hero, you play as a disillusioned cop struggling with amnesia, addiction, and an increasingly fractured sense of self. As you investigate a murder in the decaying city of Revachol, through the dialogue-heavy narrative and your interactions with the city's bizarre inhabitants, you'll be pushed to reckon with your own beliefs and biases about yourself, society, and the larger forces at play in the world. Disco Elysium doesn't shy away from difficult topics. In Revachol, we see the remnants of the city's history of failed political systems, authoritarianism, communism, capitalism, each of them leaving behind a trail of despair. As you navigate the game's world, you'll be forced to align with or reject various political ideologies. Though it doesn't offer the player a correct or incorrect point of view, the game asks tough questions about what happens when systems fail us, or when they are manipulated by those in power. And it also reminds us that, in the face of systemic collapse, it's still possible to hold on to hope, however fragile it may be. What Disco Elysium taught me is that no matter how bleak things may seem, our actions can still have meaning. It's a game about finding beauty in the chaos, and about remembering that our choices matter, even in a world that seems indifferent to our existence. And in a time where so many of us feel helpless and filled with uncertainty, Disco Elysium serves as a reminder that hope is something worth holding on to. What Remains of Edith Finch, much like The Starless Sea, is a story about stories. The titular Edith is the last surviving member of the Finches, a family known for their tragic curse. After inheriting the family home, Edith returns to wander the halls haunted by stories of all her family members' sudden deaths. Not every story is completely tragic. Some are funny, some are exciting, mysterious, terrifying. But there's something about this home and the stories hidden within its walls that makes you wonder if it's all connected. Edith Finch is less of a game and more of an interactive collection of short stories, a family saga that is tragic and devastating, but also magical and full of whimsy. When I first wandered into the Finch house, I didn't know what to expect. It's a towering, cluttered monument to memory, each room sealed like a time capsule. The further I explored, the more I realized I wasn't just learning about the Finches. I was learning about how we cope with loss, with legacy, and with the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of it all. The game doesn't answer all of its questions. Is the Finch family cursed, or is their string of tragedies just a coincidence of life, made meaningful by the stories we attach to it? I still don't know. What I do know is that Edith Finch made me think about the stories we inherit and how they shape us, how they both burden and define us. It's the kind of experience that lingers, like a memory you're not sure is entirely your own. This is the most recently released game on this list, so I may be speaking from recency bias, but I truly believe that The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom deserves its spot as one of my most personally influential games. When I finished playing the game for the first time, it had me questioning whether it might steal the top spot as my favorite game of all time. After processing it for a bit, I decided it couldn't top my actual favorite, but the fact that this is the only game to ever make me question that says a lot. Story, particularly plot, has never been a huge point of focus for the Zelda franchise, but that doesn't mean Zelda games can't excel in storytelling. The 3D entries in particular are known for their exceptional world building, rich with environmental storytelling hinting towards a deep and involved lore. The iconic characters within the series also add to the experience of the stories within the franchise. Tears of the Kingdom is one of the most story-rich games in the franchise to date, and I felt incredibly connected to Link and Zelda's relationship and their respective journeys. But where I think Tears of the Kingdom performs best is in its sense of exploration. There's an interview with series creator Shigeru Miyamoto where he explains that the creation of Legend of Zelda was partially inspired by his time exploring the hills and forests around his home when he was a kid. Miyamoto tried to put this sense of wonder and drive for discovery into his games, and I think Tears of the Kingdom best exemplifies this feeling. It's the only game that has ever made me excited to explore every single inch of the map, and each new discovery felt more exciting than the last. This, along with the emotional, action-packed endgame, is what put it above every other Zelda game for me, and what made it a contender in my list of all-time favorites. If you can't tell, I like my games with a healthy dose of philosophy, and when it comes to philosophical video games, Yoko Taro always delivers. You may be familiar with Japanese game director Yoko Taro from his 2017 action RPG NieR Automata, but before 2B and 9S Graystar screens, there was NieR for the PS3. Originally released in 2010, NieR didn't achieve the widespread acclaim of its successor, but 2021 saw the release of NieR Replicant, an enhanced remake that gave the game a second chance to shine. What struck me most about NieR Replicant is how it uses unconventional storytelling to explore themes that, at the time, were rarely seen in video games. At first, it seems like a straightforward tale of a young protagonist trying to save a loved one, but as the story unfolds, it reveals a layer of complexity that challenges your assumptions. The narrative doesn't spoon-feed you answers. Instead, it presents morally ambiguous scenarios that leave you questioning the very nature of right and wrong. What truly makes NieR special, though, is the emotional depth of its characters. Every interaction feels meaningful, and the relationships you form with your companions add a richness to the journey that lingers long after you've put down the controller. The hauntingly beautiful soundtrack also deserves a mention, as it perfectly complements the game's bittersweet tone. NieR Replicant is a game that refuses to be forgotten. It's not just an adventure, it's an exploration of humanity's contradictions, a meditation on love and sacrifice, and a reminder that sometimes the questions a story raises are more important than the answers. Whether or not you've played its better-known sequel, NieR Replicant is an experience that deserves your time. I've spoken a little bit about how some games are more than just games. They're experiences that change the way you see the world. For me, Outer Wilds embodies exactly that. It's the kind of game that you can only truly experience once, where the magic of curiosity, exploration, and discovery come together in a way that's utterly unique and unforgettable. You begin on a cozy little planet. You roast a few marshmallows by the fire, talk to your friends, and make provisions for your very first journey into space. You hop into your rickety little spaceship and set off to explore a mysterious solar system teeming with wonderful, dangerous, exciting new things. The game never tells you where to go or what to do. It trusts you to follow your instincts, to marvel at the unknown, and to embrace the thrill of discovery. You'll venture to planets where the environments are constantly changing, crumbling ruins swallowed by sandstorms, and entire landscapes torn apart by gravity. Outer Wilds' environmental storytelling is second to none. Every ruin, every artifact, every fragment of knowledge you uncover feels deliberate, like a message left behind just for you. Its mesmerizing soundtrack, combined with the ever-present ticking of time, creates an atmosphere that is both peaceful and urgent, contemplative and exhilarating. What makes Outer Wilds so profound is how it balances the smallness of our existence with the significance of what we can learn. It confronts you with the inevitability of change, the vastness of the universe, and the fragility of life. Yet it does so in a way that feels hopeful, even comforting. Yes, we are small. Yes, our time is fleeting. But the act of learning, of seeking knowledge, of trying to understand even a fraction of this infinite cosmos, that is what makes our life meaningful. I can't overstate how Outer Wilds made me feel. It's a game that will have you staring at the stars differently, or at least staring at your bedroom ceiling with tears in your eyes after your first playthrough. To put it simply, This game is incredible. Undertale is a game that completely upended my expectations of what a role-playing game could be. At first, it feels like a classic RPG with quirky characters and turn-based combat, but as you play, it becomes clear that Undertale is anything but traditional. It's a game that encourages you to rethink the very mechanics of the genre. What makes Undertale so special is its emphasis on choice, particularly the choice to show mercy. In most RPGs, defeating enemies is another part of the journey. In Undertale, you have the option to spare every enemy you encounter. What's more, the game remembers your choices, and those choices have a profound impact on the story and its characters. Choosing kindness isn't always easy. It requires patience and understanding, but it is incredibly rewarding. For me, Undertale's greatest strength is its characters, many of which are absent from the story if you choose to play in a typical RPG fashion and destroy the enemies you encounter. Each character is designed to be memorable and hilarious in a different way. Even a one-time encounter with a random enemy left a goofy grin on my face. Undertale believes that every action has consequences, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose compassion. It's a game that celebrates the power of connection and understanding, and it reminded me that we all have the capacity to make the world a little brighter, one kind act at a time. The Beginner's Guide is a game that felt like it was speaking to me directly. Of course, the creator Davey Wreden literally speaks to the player as the game's narrator, but that's not what I mean. After creating the iconic Stanley Parable, a comedic walking simulator with a fourth wall-breaking narrator that redefined the idea of choice in video games, Davey Wreden wanted to create a more serious game that touched on themes of creative identity and authorship. I don't want to explain the premise here because I think this is one of those games where it's best to go in as blind as possible, but I'll try my best to explain my feelings about it without ruining the magic. It takes roughly 90 minutes to play through, so if you're at all interested, please check it out for yourself. So, I consider myself a creative person. I've always been interested in artistic hobbies, especially music. I enjoy playing guitar and writing songs when inspiration strikes. If you're anything like me, you understand the complicated feelings of self-worth that come with being a creator. I felt in the past like my identity was so closely tied to my ability to create that when I would inevitably burn out and go months without touching an instrument, it would feel like I didn't even know who I was. If I couldn't do the one thing that I always said was what I was meant to do, then what was the point? What if I'm simply not the person I thought I was, the person my loved ones believe I am? What if I can't bring myself to be honest in my art for fear of judgment? I'm an incredibly private person. Most of my creations feel like entries in a secret diary of my deepest, most intimate thoughts and feelings. Am I still an artist if I don't want to share that with the world? If I don't want my passion to become my career? Why don't I have the same drive as my other creative peers? Am I just not trying hard enough? Am I a failure? I've spent a very long time entertaining these thoughts, letting something I love become a massive black hole of insecurity, leading to prolonged bouts of anxiety and depression. It was hard not to feel like my struggles were unique, and no one would understand. After all, if I love making music, shouldn't it be easy? The Beginner's Guide made me feel seen in a way that I had never experienced. The story of Davy and Coda hit me like a truck. It was like, I finally understood why I felt the way I did, and I wasn't the only one with those feelings. Davey Wreden managed to build a narrative about creation that so authentically captures the complexities of being an artist, I was left in tears by the time the end credits rolled, filled with a sense of catharsis. Years later, I still think about this game often, and watching others experience it for the first time brings me a lot of comfort. The Beginner's Guide is an experience I'd recommend to anyone, and I'm beyond excited to see what Davey Wreden does next. I first played through Kingdom Hearts 2 in my uncle's living room on his old PS2, sitting side by side with my sister, and those moments are some of my most treasured and precious childhood memories. The Kingdom Hearts franchise as a whole is my favorite game series of all time, but Kingdom Hearts 2 is the one that impacted me the most. It's not just nostalgia goggles that makes this game so incredible for me. Somehow, amidst the silly and often awkward dialogue, the intense melodrama, and the wild plot beats, Kingdom Hearts 2 balances all of that with heartwarming relationships and emotional character arcs. I've always related to the protagonist, Sora, a boy with seemingly boundless optimism and loyalty, with a strong drive to protect his loved ones. I remember one particular scene where he cries, overwhelmed with emotion, and when 10-year-old me saw that on my uncle's old TV screen, I started crying right along with him. It's hard to explain, but in that moment I felt so deeply connected to him and his journey. The game also places a lot of emphasis on this theme of identity, of discovering who you are and accepting yourself. That spoke to me at an age where I often felt like an outcast amongst my peers. Take Roxas, for example. Here's a character who isn't supposed to exist, struggling to understand who he is and why he feels so much. Watching him grapple with his identity, his friendships, and the inevitability of his fate broke my heart. And it made me think about the ways we define ourselves. How much of who we are comes from the people we love and the connections we share. Or Riku, who feels like he's not good enough and tries to distance himself from his friends and sinks into darkness. Despite his best efforts, Sora's ceaseless acceptance and love is enough to bring him back into the light. What makes Kingdom Hearts 2 so special for me, though, is how it always reminds me of those times I spent playing it with my sister. We laughed, struggled through tough boss fights, and marveled at the worlds we explored together. It's a game that brought us closer, and every time I revisit it, I feel that same sense of nostalgia and warmth. Kingdom Hearts 2 is messy, melodramatic, and over the top, and I love it for that. It's also heartfelt, profound, and genuinely fun. It's a game that reminds you of the people you shared it with and the memories you made along the way. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you were able to find enjoyment in listening to me ramble on about my favorite games. In the future, I'd like to post more content focused on one game at a time. The next video I have planned is going to be a retrospective on To the Moon. So if that interests you at all, I would love if you'd hit the subscribe button and notifications bell below. This has been episode 1 of Stories and Sidequests, and I'll see you in episode 2.